She was never the type of woman who found comfort in simplicity. In the beginning, her husband believed that her desire for a better life was just harmless dreaming, something everyone does when imagining a brighter future. But over time, her dreams turned into comparisons, and those comparisons slowly poisoned the marriage. Every time they sat at the dinner table, she noticed what other couples had and what she didn't. Every trip to someone else's home became a reminder to her of what she believed her husband failed to provide. She didn't see the love he offered daily, the small sacrifices he made, or the stability he worked hard to maintain. Instead, she saw the things they didn't own and the lifestyle she felt she deserved. The loyalty she promised on their wedding day was slowly being replaced by resentment she never openly admitted. While he believed they were building a life together brick by brick, she felt trapped in a life that wasn't moving fast enough for her liking. She wanted shortcuts, comfort without waiting, luxury without effort, success without struggle. The husband noticed her growing coldness, but he mistook it for stress or fatigue, not realizing that she had already begun imagining a different life, one where he didn't exist. The more he tried to fix things, the more she pulled away, convinced that she wasn't meant to live an ordinary life. She wanted more money, more comfort, more status, things she thought he could never give her. What made it worse was how she began comparing him to others, even if only in her mind. He could sense it in her silence, in the distant look she gave him, in the way she sighed when he talked about their future. She wasn't listening anymore. She was waiting for a chance, waiting for someone better, waiting for a way out. Loyalty became conditional, her love became negotiable, and every time he tried to talk to her, she answered with irritation, as if his presence alone reminded her of what she lacked. Despite all this, he still loved her deeply. He still believed the marriage could be saved. He worked longer hours, cut his own needs, and tried to make her smile, unaware that she had already emotionally checked out. She wasn't looking at what he could be, she was only looking at what he wasn't. Her expectations rose while her patience faded. The warmth in her eyes disappeared, replaced by a quiet disappointment she never bothered to explain. She didn't appreciate the loyalty he offered, because loyalty meant nothing to someone who was already seeking something else. By the time she finally left, the truth became painfully clear. The marriage wasn't broken in one moment. It broke slowly, quietly, through years of unnoticed dissatisfaction and unspoken bitterness. Her desire for a better life wasn't just about money. It was about an unrealistic dream she thought she could chase without consequences. She didn't realize that the life she was abandoning was the only one built on genuine love, stability, and trust, the very things she would one day lose completely. The day she finally chose to walk away wasn't a loud, dramatic moment filled with shouting or tears. It was colder than that, quiet, sharp, and deliberate, like she had rehearsed it many times in her mind before ever speaking a single word. She stood in the doorway with her suitcase already packed, not giving him a chance to ask why or when she had made this decision. In her eyes, this wasn't a breakup, it was an escape. She convinced herself she was stepping into a life that would reward her for her courage. A life where comfort and luxury waited for her just outside the home she now viewed as a cage. Every promise she had once made was suddenly irrelevant because she believed she deserved more than what she had. And instead of fighting for the life they built together, she chose the fantasy of a future that didn't include him. She didn't leave with hesitation, she left with pride. She believed she was choosing a life of endless possibilities, convinced that the world beyond their front door owed her something extraordinary just because she wanted it. She didn't think about the man standing behind her, the years they shared, or the memories they created. In her mind, those were obstacles, not attachments. She believed she was meant for something greater, something he could never provide because he was too ordinary, too simple, too small. In her growing list of expectations, with every step she took away from him, she silently blamed him for a life she felt wasn't good enough. What hurt him the most wasn't the fact that she left, but the way she left. There was no goodbye, no moment of doubt, no sign of love left in her voice. She acted as if the years they spent together were a mistake she was finally correcting. The man she walked toward, the one she thought would give her the better life, filled her head with promises that matched her fantasies. He told her she deserved more, and she believed him. She left chasing validation, not realizing she was walking straight into a world built on illusions and temporary affection. The thought that she could lose everything never crossed her mind. She was too blinded by the thrill of something new. As she drove away, she didn't look back. Why would she? In that moment, she thought she was leveling up, choosing a life of comfort that would erase every disappointment she felt. She imagined a future full of expensive restaurants, big houses, and luxurious experiences she thought were missing from her marriage. She thought the world was waiting to give her everything she wanted, just because she had the courage to abandon the life she once shared. But the truth was far different. The path she chose wasn't paved with gold. It was paved with lies hidden beneath temporary excitement. And yet, she walked it with confidence, believing she had traded love for a better life, never realizing that she had only traded stability for a storm she was completely unprepared to face. When she walked out of his life, the silence that followed felt heavier than the betrayal itself. For the first few weeks, he moved through life like a man learning how to breathe again. Every corner of the house reminded him of her: the empty chair at the dining table, the quiet bedroom, the cold space beside him where she once slept. It wasn't just the loss of a wife he was dealing with. It was the loss of a future he had planned with sincerity. Yet even in the middle of that heartbreak, he never allowed bitterness to consume him. He didn't chase her, didn't beg her to stay, and didn't try to compete with the man she left him for. Instead, he sat with the pain, let it wash over him, and then slowly used it to rebuild a version of himself he had forgotten existed. He realized something important. He had spent so much time trying to make her happy that he had forgotten about his own growth, his own dreams, and his own worth. Her departure, cruel as it was, became the mirror that forced him to look at himself in a new light. He began waking up earlier, investing more time in his work, and focusing on the goals he once pushed aside to make room for her endless demands. The sadness didn't vanish overnight, but each day he found a little more strength than the day before. Work became his sanctuary, progress became his therapy, and self-respect became his new foundation. He didn't transform out of revenge. He transformed out of necessity. He had to survive, and the only way to survive was to evolve. The nights were the hardest, where her absence felt like an open wound, but he filled those hours with learning, planning, and improving. He took on new projects, sharpened his skills, and surrounded himself with people who believed in him. Slowly, the world that once felt painfully small without her began expanding in unexpected ways. Opportunities he had never noticed before began appearing. People appreciated his dedication, admired his consistency, and recognized the quiet strength he carried inside him. Bit by bit, he started rising, not dramatically, not suddenly, but steadily, like a man who had finally remembered his value. He upgraded his life not to prove her wrong, but to prove to himself that he would never again allow someone else's insecurity to define his worth. His financial condition improved, he built a stronger social network, and he created a lifestyle she once dreamed of, but never had the patience to build with him. Ironically, everything she had chased outside their marriage was now becoming a reality in his life, built through discipline instead of delusion. Most importantly, he healed, the anger faded, the heartbreak became a lesson. And the man she left standing alone eventually became someone unrecognizable, stronger, more confident, more successful, and more peaceful than ever before. She believed leaving him would break him, but instead it awakened a version of him she never expected to see. The life she thought he could never give her was the exact life he was now creating, only without her in it. The life she ran toward with so much confidence slowly revealed itself to be nothing more than a beautifully decorated illusion. In the beginning, everything felt exciting: new places, new promises, new people who flattered her with attention she mistook for genuine care. The man she chose over her husband showered her with compliments, convinced her that she was meant for more, and fed her fantasies of a luxurious lifestyle. She believed every word because she wanted to believe it. She thought she had finally escaped the ordinary life she blamed for her unhappiness. But as the days turned into weeks, the cracks beneath that glittering surface began to show. The man she trusted was not the savior she imagined. His affection was conditional, unpredictable, and often manipulative. The promises he made were empty. The lifestyle he flashed around was borrowed, unstable, or part of a show designed only to impress. She realized too late that she wasn't his partner, she was his convenience. He enjoyed the thrill of taking her from her husband, but he had no intention of giving her the better life she expected. Soon the expensive outings stopped, the attention faded, and the affection disappeared completely. She found herself living in temporary places, always moving, always adjusting, never belonging. The comfort she chased was nowhere to be found. Her dream began collapsing slowly, like a structure built on sand. She had no support system, no home of her own, and no one she could trust. Every time she tried to ask for more stability, more commitment, or more respect, she was met with excuses or irritation. And then, one day, without warning, the man she sacrificed everything for simply walked out of her life. No explanation, no goodbye, just like she had done to her husband. The irony cut deeper than she ever expected. She was left standing alone with nothing but a few clothes in a bag and a heart full of regret. As time passed, her situation worsened. Savings ran out. The friends who once welcomed her during her glow-up phase disappeared when she needed help. The world she romanticized had no place for someone without money, beauty, or benefit to offer. She drifted through cheap motels, couched, surfed with people who barely tolerated her, and eventually found herself sleeping in places she once would have been ashamed to even look at. The nights were the worst. Each one stretched endlessly, filled with cold winds, hunger, and memories she couldn't escape. During those lonely nights, she replayed the moment she left her husband over and over again. She remembered his steady hands, his quiet love, his loyalty, things she once dismissed as not enough. Now they felt like treasures she threw away without thinking. Regret became her constant companion. She started realizing how blind she had been, how her unrealistic expectations had destroyed the only stable life she ever had. She missed the warmth of a home, the scent of a familiar kitchen, the sound of someone caring whether she had eaten or not. Everything she had left behind was exactly what she needed now. She had tried to chase a fantasy, but instead, she walked into a nightmare of her own making. And with nowhere else to go and no one left to turn to, she finally accepted the painful truth. The life she abandoned was the life she was now desperately wishing she still had. When she finally stood at his door, it didn't look anything like the dramatic confrontation she once imagined. There were no clever apologies, no charming excuses, no confident words meant to win him back. Instead, she looked like the shell of the woman he once knew, tired, dirty, trembling, and carrying a silence heavier than any explanation. Her clothes were worn, her face was thin, and her eyes, once full of pride, were now filled only with shame and desperation. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was asking for survival. The cold reality of life had stripped her of everything, including the arrogance she once wore so confidently. He opened the door slowly, surprised more than anything else. Months ago, he used to imagine this scene 100 different ways, sometimes angrily, sometimes with longing. But none of those imagined versions prepared him for what he saw. She wasn't the woman who left him. She was a broken version of herself, standing in front of the man she had abandoned with nothing left to offer. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with memories, betrayal, and the painful silence of unfinished conversations. And then she finally whispered his name, her voice shaking so much that it barely resembled her own. She told him she had nowhere to go, no one to help her, and nothing left in her life that resembled stability. She didn't blame anyone, she didn't defend her choices, she didn't pretend that her leaving had been a mistake of passion. Instead, she admitted the truth she once refused to see, that she had thrown away a good man, a secure home, and a life filled with genuine love just because she was chasing illusions. It was the first honest thing she had said in a long time. He listened quietly. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, because anger requires energy, and he had spent all of that on rebuilding his life. What remained was a mixture of shock, pity, and the faint sadness of seeing someone fall so far from where they once stood. She begged him not for love, not for marriage, not for a second chance, but simply for a place to rest, a meal, a moment of safety. The pride that once controlled her was gone, replaced by humility carved out of suffering. As he stood in the doorway watching her shiver, he felt the weight of every memory, every promise, every wound she had left behind. A part of him remembered the love they once shared, the life they once dreamed of. Another part remembered the night she walked away, leaving him to pick up the pieces alone. Now fate had brought her back to the same door she slammed shut, only this time she wasn't running toward a better life. She was running from the consequences of her choices. What he did next became the heart of the story. Whether he slowly stepped aside to let her in, offering compassion despite everything, or quietly closed the door to protect the peace he fought so hard to build, both choices carried equal weight. Because in that moment, the power that once belonged to her now belonged entirely to him. Her fall was complete, and his decision, whatever it was, became the final chapter of the life they once shared and the beginning of the life they would live apart.